Hello, everyone. Tonight, I invite you into a case that feels like fiction, but every detail is terrifyingly real. A devoted husband, a midnight 9/11 call, and a trail of deleted Snapchat messages that revealed more than just betrayal. They exposed a plan to kill. This isn't just a story, it's a calculated erasure, and it starts with a single gunshot. Welcome to True Crime Vault. My name is Ben, and today I'll be taking you into the chilling case of wife's Snapchat accidentally reveals how she murdered her husband. This crime occurred on the 18th of June, 2021, in the quiet town of Traer, Iowa, where a devoted father named Ryan Cooper was found shot dead in his recliner execution style while he slept. At the heart of this case is Karina Cooper, his wife, who claimed to have found him moments later. But what unfolded was a tangled story of infidelity, digital footprints, and a murder plot buried beneath Snapchat messages. Let's uncover the full story together. And if this is your first time here on True Crime Vault, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscription. It helps us bring more cases like this to light. At 4:33 a.m. on the 18th of June, 2021, the calm of a rural Iowa morning shattered with a single 911 call. A woman's voice, shaking and frantic, screamed through the phone, "There's blood everywhere, my husband, my kids are here." When deputies arrived at 1846 Kelvin Avenue, they were greeted by a woman in full-blown hysterics, Karina Cooper, and the chilling sight of her husband, Ryan Cooper, slumped in his recliner, shot twice in the face while he slept. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables missing, and no barking from the family's fiercely protective Rottweiler. Whoever had done this wasn't a stranger. And Karina, before calling the police, had dialed her brother-in-law. Why? For years the case would stagnate. A grieving widow, 3 fatherless children, and a town full of rumors. But behind Karina's carefully crafted performance was a truth darker than anyone imagined. The Snapchat messages she believed had disappeared, they didn't. And what they revealed was more than infidelity. It was a blueprint for murder. A small-town love affair, a $500,000 life insurance policy, and a husband who never saw it coming. So what really happened in that house on K Avenue? Who pulled the trigger? And why did it take 3 years and a deleted Snapchat to uncover the truth? Ryan Cooper was the kind of man you might miss in a crowd, but never forget once you'd met him. Born on the 1st of June, 1979, Ryan grew up in Traer, Iowa, a quiet farming town where everyone knew everyone else. He graduated from North Tama High School in 1998 and immediately began working on his family's farm. Farming wasn't just a job, it was a legacy, and Ryan carried it with quiet pride. He was a cattle producer, a truck driver, and a man of routine. Long days in the fields, early mornings, and so often, he would fall asleep in the recliner in the living room rather than make it to bed. He had a son from a previous marriage, and after marrying Karina Alpers in 2009, the couple had 3 more children, Cade, Cable, and Cortland. By all outward appearances, the Coopers had built a stable life. Karina, born in 1977, had her own hair salon business, Karina's Lasting Impressions, run from the outbuildings on their property. She was known as a hard worker, energetic, and deeply involved in her kids' lives. Friends of Ryan's even said she felt like part of the family. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Karina described herself as a Karen when drunk, a self-aware nod to her volatile temper after a few drinks. She would lash out at Ryan with sharp words, especially when it came to money. The Cooper farm was not technically owned by them, but leased through a rent-to-own scheme, and Karina resented not having control over their finances. Still, there were no records of domestic abuse, no police calls, no restraining orders, just whispers, just silence. Yet the silence spoke volumes. Karina had a younger male client, Houston Danker, who came by often for haircuts. A single father in his 20s, Houston was, according to town gossip, more than just a customer. And Ryan had started to notice. He saw something once on Snapchat, something inappropriate. He confronted Karina. She denied everything, but something in their marriage had already shifted. So the question now isn't whether Karina and Houston had a secret, it's whether that secret was enough to kill for. It was 4:33 a.m. on the 18th of June, 2021, when the Tama County Sheriff's Office received a panicked 911 call from a woman in Traer, Iowa. The voice on the line was Karina Cooper's frantic, trembling, almost unintelligible. She screamed that someone had broken into her home, that her husband was covered in blood, that her children were in danger. "They're here. Someone's here," she cried, ordering her kids to run to their rooms and lock the doors. Within 7 minutes, the first deputy arrived at 1846 Kelvin Avenue. Ryan Cooper, 42 years old, was found dead in his recliner, still in his sleeping position, feet up, body limp. He had been shot twice in the face with a .22 caliber rifle. Execution style. There were no defensive wounds, no struggle, no sounds of a fight. Whoever pulled the trigger knew Ryan would be there unmoving, vulnerable, and whoever it was had gotten close enough to aim, twice, without hesitation. But what made the scene truly disturbing wasn't just the blood or the coldness of the kill, it was what was missing. There were no signs of forced entry. The back door was locked. Nothing had been stolen. The house was undisturbed. Even more puzzling, the family's Rottweiler, Ransom, known for barking at everything, and everyone had not made a sound that night. No alarm, no struggle, no barking. The killer didn't break in. The killer was already inside. Adding to the strangeness, Karina had first called her brother-in-law, Aaron Cooper, a firefighter, who lived just minutes away before she called 911. When asked why, she said she was panicked, confused, but Aaron later told investigators something else. Karina hadn't seemed scared. She had seemed theatrical. He also noticed something else. The blood was already drying. It was dark, congealing. Ryan had been dead for longer than Karina claimed. Detectives took her statement hours later. Her story was confusing, contradictory. She claimed she heard a loud thump, thought something had fallen. She walked around the house, looked in the kitchen, looked at Ryan but thought he was asleep. Then she turned the light on and saw the blood. She ran to the gun safe but forgot the code. She screamed. The kids came down. Then she called Aaron, then 911. But when investigators examined her timeline, the pieces didn't fit. Too much time had passed. Too much had been erased. And yet, something remained. A single .22 shell casing left on the floor near Ryan's chair. It was the one thing the killer forgot to clean up, and it would come back later like a ghost. Quiet, but undeniable. At first, it didn't seem like a murder investigation. The official tone from law enforcement was cautious. The scene was strange, yes, but there was no sign of forced entry, and no known enemies. Maybe it was a tragic accident, maybe even suicide. After all, Ryan Cooper kept firearms in the house. Investigators needed time, but time began to reveal cracks. The autopsy made one thing clear. This wasn't an accident. Ryan had been shot twice in the face with a .22 rifle. The shots were clean, deliberate, from close range. Suicide was ruled out. The weapon, however, was missing. Police began quietly examining Karina's statements. Her timeline was fuzzy, her emotions at the scene too loud, too rehearsed. Friends and neighbors were interviewed. Then came a quiet tip. She used to message a guy named Houston. I think there was something going on. The name surfaced again. Houston Danker, Karina's client, 21 years younger. A single father. Police dug into phone records. Then social media. Snapchat mostly. Snapchat was supposed to be safe. Messages disappear. Nothing is stored. But nothing is ever truly gone. When detectives obtained Karina's phone, something strange happened. Within hours, her Snapchat account was remotely deleted, even though the device was already in police custody. It was a red flag. And it was too late. Digital forensics had already begun recovering deleted content, and what they found cracked the case wide open. Snapchat messages between Karina and Houston revealed far more than flirtation. They exposed an emotional affair, a shared fantasy, and explicit plans for a new life without Ryan. Some messages even fantasized about a big accident, no survivors. Others spoke of moving Houston in as the new father. More damning were the messages exchanged around the exact time of the murder while Karina claimed to be asleep. She wasn't. She was up, messaging Houston. talking about the kids, talking about what comes next. Karina claims she had never even touched the gun. But then, 4 months after the murder, a new witness stepped forward, a co-worker of Houston's. He said Houston had given him 3 firearms for safekeeping, claiming he had a new girlfriend with children and didn't want weapons in the house. One of those guns? A Ruger .22 rifle, the same caliber used to kill Ryan, and when tested against the single casing found at the scene, it matched perfectly. On the 1st of July, 2025, nearly 4 years after Ryan Cooper's murder, the trial of Karina Cooper began. She was charged with first-degree murder, premeditated, calculated, and cold-blooded. The courtroom was packed. Ryan's family sat in silence. Karina's children, now older, were absent. And at the center of it all stood Karina herself, dressed in pale colors, hair neat, face drawn tight. She pleaded not guilty. From the opening arguments, the prosecution wasted no time. They painted a clear picture: a failing marriage, financial hardship, a secret affair, and $500,000 in life insurance as motive. They presented the messages between Karina and Houston as a conspiracy, not just infidelity, but a plan to erase Ryan. They described how Karina had staged the crime scene, delayed the 911 call, and pretended to be asleep while Snapchat told a very different story. The digital trail was devastating. Prosecutors read aloud the most chilling messages. Big accident. No survivors. You're already their daddy. I wish he was dead. The courtroom stiffened. Jurors shifted in their seats. Then came the forensic link. The shell casing matched to Houston's rifle, and GPS data from both phones placed them together on the night of the murder. The motive, means, and opportunity aligned too perfectly to ignore. But then came the twist. Karina's defense launched an aggressive counterattack, not denying the affair, but blaming Houston for everything. According to them, Karina had been manipulated, swept up in a fantasy, a vulnerable woman, groomed by a younger man with control issues. Yes, she had messaged him things she shouldn't have, but that didn't make her a killer. They argued Karina didn't pull the trigger. In fact, she was terrified of guns. She never saw Houston that night, she said. She had no idea he'd actually kill Ryan. It was all an online fantasy that turned real, like Grand Theft Auto, but in real life. The defense also pointed out one glaring inconsistency. If this was a perfect plan, why was Houston not even around anymore? Why did he move on with another woman? If they killed for love, why wasn't there a life together? The prosecution fired back, because there was no love, only greed. And Karina got the money. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Karina Cooper, guilty of the offense of murder in the first degree. Karina showed no emotion as the verdict was read. She will be sentenced to life in prison without parole. Was Karina Cooper a cold-blooded killer or a desperate woman trapped in her own emotional chaos? The answer lies in the gray zone between fantasy and intent, between wishful thinking and calculated action. Karina was, by most accounts, a mother who loved her children and a woman who worked hard. She ran a small salon, juggled parenting, and supported her husband on the family farm. But behind the everyday pressures was a storm brewing: financial stress, emotional distance, and a growing resentment toward a life she no longer felt in control of. The affair with Houston Danker didn't come out of nowhere. It was an escape, a fantasy fueled by attention, flattery, and the illusion of starting over. But Karina didn't just daydream. She started writing the script. Her messages weren't idle venting. They were detailed, suggestive, and pointed. References to accidents, death, and removing obstacles. Over time, her language became bolder. The fantasy blurred with reality. And in that blur, something irreversible happened. Clinical psychologists often describe this shift as emotional displacement. When the fantasy becomes too fulfilling, it replaces judgment. You stop seeing the person you live with as a human and start seeing them as a problem to solve. Karina's trial defense portrayed her as manipulated by a younger man, but the messages suggest otherwise. Karina was not passive. She initiated, she fantasized, she controlled the language. When Ryan confronted her about the messages, she didn't stop. She got smarter, more secretive, deleting conversations, changing habits, planning around perception. There's no indication Karina was mentally ill. There was no history of abuse, no trauma cited in her defense. What we see instead is a woman who became increasingly comfortable justifying the unthinkable. And that's what makes this case chilling. Karina didn't snap. She drifted, slowly, quietly, step by step, until murder no longer felt like a line she couldn't cross. She wasn't insane. She wasn't under duress. She was certain. As of now, Karina Cooper awaits formal sentencing. But in Iowa, a conviction for first-degree murder carries only one option: life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Her fate is sealed, but the story isn't over, because another trial is coming. In August 2025, Houston Danker, the man Karina once called her soulmate, is scheduled to stand trial for the same murder. His defense now claims he was never at the scene, that he has an alibi, that Karina acted alone. In a twist of legal irony, the lovers turned co-conspirators have become each other's scapegoat. And the question now becomes, will Houston go down with her or walk away free? Public opinion is fractured. Some believe Karina orchestrated the whole thing, using Houston as a pawn. Others argue Houston was the true manipulator, the one who pulled the trigger and let Karina take the fall. Meanwhile, the Cooper family continues to grieve. Ryan's children, now growing up without a father, are left with the legacy of betrayal too complex to explain. The $500,000 life insurance? It's gone spent on failed businesses and fleeting distractions. No new life was built. No dream came true. Only silence remains. And perhaps that's the real tragedy. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story of murder. It was a story of erasure, of a man slowly written out of his own life by the people closest to him. And as we close the file on Karina Cooper, one question still lingers. Is justice truly served? If the person who pulled the trigger may still be out there, what this case reminds us is simple, yet deeply unsettling. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it shares your last name. Ryan Cooper wasn't killed by a stranger in the night. He was killed by someone who kissed him goodnight, by someone who promised forever, then rewrote that promise into a plan for murder. In the digital age, secrets don't stay buried. Karina Cooper thought she could erase her messages, her intentions, her tracks. But even the smallest trace, a deleted Snapchat, a single shell casing, was enough to bring truth to light. This story isn't just about crime. It's about trust, and how easily that trust can be weaponized when combined with resentment, greed, and silence. So I ask you, what would you have seen had you been one of Karina's friends? Would you have noticed the cracks? Would you have said something? Leave a comment below. What do you think truly happened that night in Traer, Iowa? Was this all Karina? Or did Houston Danker deserve a cell next to hers? We read every comment. Let your voice be heard.